doesn't make sense here. So what I would think about this is the following. Right now, in 9/11, we had the big debate on the overall nature of the action. Is it MIHOP? Is it that some agency or force made it happen on purpose, which is the one that I found to be accurate, or is it LIHOP? Quite a number of authors, the most of all, right? This was the most popular, other than the lesser ones like Unanswered Questions. The ones who said let it happen on purpose, in the case of 9/11, were wrong, because there was nobody out there who could do it. But now, in this case, I think we have to look at LIHOP as something that the evidence seems to be pointing to. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. It's the afternoon of Friday, the 20th of November, just 1 week after these Paris terrorist attacks. So the French police have this knack for killing all the important witnesses. This very suspicious. They can't make up their mind about this woman. Did she blow herself up or not? So that has to be looked into. There is no doubt that this is, from the official point of view, a tremendous bureaucratic failure. And it's all the more embarrassing because the same cast of characters had the Charlie Hebdo case thrown at them or something else, right? But anyway, the Charlie Hebdo occurred in the first week of January. And after that, the French government was supposed to introduce all of these vast, sweeping reforms to make sure that could never happen again. And now somehow all of that is forgotten, right? I think probably the British journalist on NPR this morning saying the French had done nothing. That may be exaggerated, but it was not effective. Remember my constant admonition: don't take away the civil rights and political rights of the people unless and until you have installed a mole detector at the Interior Ministry and the DGSE and the DGRI. I think that the domestic one is called the old Renseignements Généraux, Renseignements Intérieurs, I guess at this point. You need to put a mole detector in those places. All right? So it's les taupes, la vieille taupe. There used to be a bookshop in Paris called La Vieille Taupe, which I had attended, right? It was undoubtedly an intelligence drop for many. I was looking for books. I think that the story of why the French can't block these attempts is somehow to be found in a book on the shelves of La Vieille Taupe, because this seems to be the big issue that, again, the administration is factionalized. In the past, it was the La Synergie and La Cagoule and the Grand Orient. There are also a couple of other Freemasonic currents, groups, organizations, which I'm sure have their rivalries. So, again, what if ISIS does this? It's sort of a motu proprio. In other words, they are the driving force, right? ISIS says, oh, my God, we've got to step up our recruiting. We've got to show that we're just as ferocious as ever. Let's attack Paris. Let's threaten Washington. Let's threaten New York. Let's threaten Rome, the pillars of the Western world. And then maybe we can refurbish, right? We can burnish our terrorist image, they would say, and recruit all sorts of people, would say ISIS. So here's the other problem. Bernard Cazeneuve. So it's the Interior Ministry. It's written Cazeneuve. He is the Interior Minister. And in the case of France and these other countries, the Interior Minister is not like the Secretary of the Interior here in the U.S., who is somebody who worries about forests and minerals and mining and things like that. It is the Police Minister. It's the Internal Security Minister. In other words, if terrorism occurs, the buck stops with him. The buck goes to Bernard Cazeneuve, and it stops there. And in the past, France, like many other countries, had a system which was called ministerial responsibility. And it simply meant that if a debacle, a catastrophic event, occurred on your watch, you had to resign. And there's very good reason for this, which I will now try to explain. As the world has become more oligarchical, and as the oligarchs have banded together essentially against their own people and against reality, the principle of ministerial responsibility has fallen into desuetude. It's not practiced anymore. It's passé. It's quaint, I guess they would say. Here we have Cazeneuve. He was in charge in the first week of January when the Charlie Hebdo occurred. He promised to institute those sweeping reforms. Now we see that the reforms have amounted to nothing, and yet he's still there. And what does he do now? He does not have the decency to resign, but he says, I want more power. Now, this is crazy. The principle of ministerial responsibility, and I've summed this up many times, but I think people still need to hear it. There are countries where if the national soccer team loses a big game, the sports minister must resign. If there's a big railway crash and lots of people get killed, the transportation minister must resign. All the more in a case like this, I'm amazed to see that Cazeneuve is still the Interior Minister of France, but maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Here in the United States, we have the parallel, the precursor, right, the precedent of John Ashcroft. So here we have a thoroughly incompetent bureaucratic bungler who was in power on September 11, 2001. And his response to this was to demand the Patriot Act and what we have to call liberticide laws. This is a good word. Learn it. Liberticide. It's an adjective, or it can be a liberticide, like a homicide, a fratricide, a liberticide. The act of killing freedom, of destroying freedom and liberty. So that's what Ashcroft did. He said, I want liberticide laws. And of course, what this amounts to is Ashcroft or Cazeneuve now saying, the more I fail, the more power you have to give me. Let me fail again so I can get more power. This is absolutely insane. The reason that ministerial responsibility started out is to maintain some modicum of public confidence in the government. In other words, an oligarch like Ashcroft or Cazeneuve, they have to know that if they let this happen, either through negligence or through ill will, right, through criminal intent, they will be fired. There's no two ways about it. You can't do it any other way. Otherwise, you get into this dilemma of the guy saying, yeah, I failed, but now I want more power. It's simply impossible. Up to the point, obviously, of having a dictatorship. In other words, the idea is if you want to get rid of me, I'll fight all the way to a dictatorship. Now, so those are some of the things about this. Some of them, I think, come down on the MyHop side, some of them on the LIHOP side. I think there's a significant faction in France that wants to let these things happen for their own reasons, but I think it has let them. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. My, how the time flies. This is now segment 7 of our broadcast here on Friday, the 20th of November, as we're recording. I was just going through why Bernard Cazeneuve, under the usual system of ministerial responsibility, this current Interior Minister of France should have resigned. Of course, Ashcroft, the Ashcroft case here in the U.S. was even more éclatant, right? Even more blatant, and he did not resign. Now, let's just look. What's with these French security official types, right? Are they mixed in with the Marseille drug mafia, or maybe the Grand Orient Freemasons, or maybe the Cagoule in its current form? Claude Guéant, I mentioned him before. Claude Guéant was at various times chief of staff to President Nicolas Sarkozy. He participated in running the French government. Claude Guéant was also the Interior Minister of France between 2011 and February 2011 and May 2012. So this Marat case comes towards the end of his tenure as Interior Minister, right? The Marat case, I think, was in March of 2012, and then Guéant was out as Interior Minister in May of 2012. And I guess that's the change in the government, right? That's the election of Hollande, more or less. So just recently now, on October 8th, 2015, a month or little more ago, Claude Guéant was convicted of embezzlement, and he, along with 5 prefects, right, prefects of police, right, these French officials who, they run the police in a département, I guess it is. Guéant and 5 prefects were convicted of embezzlement, and they were sentenced to 30 months in jail, but they got off with a suspended sentence, right? Then they didn't have to go to jail. And each of them got, I think, a 75,000 euro fine for embezzlement. So the predecessor of Cazeneuve, Guéant, was lucky to escape jail. So this is all very, very strange, and I hope people in France will be interested. Also, this question of the 3 Freemasonic groups, right? The Grand Orient, the Grand Lodge of France, and the National Grand Lodge of France. We need to learn more about that. At any rate, the outcome is that President Hollande of France is now on a diplomatic offensive, which could be a positive thing, could be. If he tries to organize the great powers, the U.S. and Russia, to join with France and maybe Germany or some others, to go in and attack Assad, that will be insane. And the key role of Putin in this is to make sure that does not happen. We note that this week, Putin, speaking to a group of Russian generals, said, I want you, generals who are running the Russian presence in Syria, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Levant, I want you to cooperate with the French as with an ally. On that same day, the Pentagon spokesman, this guy Cook, came out and said, no, we don't want any part of that because we want to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. That is criminal insanity. The guy who also has to be fired is Ashton Carter, the utopian pedant of essentially warfare, a tremendous menace to the future of the United States. So Hollande will be here in Washington, D.C. on the 24th of November, goes on to Moscow at the 26th of November. He wants to have a grand alliance against terrorism. United States should join. United States should be leading it, but we have Allen and Petraeus, and we have all of these careers that depend on getting rid of Assad. All of those careers have to end. The American people can't be dragged into more war because of this absurd obsession against Assad and this absurd predilection for these terrorists, right? The moderate terrorists, the Al-Qaeda, who are now the moderates. Okay, so here's the other thing. Kerry, as a result of one of the Vienna talks, Kerry is saying that there should be a peace process beginning. Here's the problem. There must be no ceasefire with ISIS in the sense that no territory, not one human being, must be left under the yoke of the fanatical genocidal cult called ISIS. You can't leave people under the control of those butchers, and then they can systematically kill them while the world looks on aghast. No. Nor can you turn to Nusra, Free Syrian Army, the 300 sects, sectlets, splinter groups, and so forth. They are all reeling under the Russian bombing. All of them want a ceasefire. We need military victory. In other words, we need a military solution as against ISIS. I recommend the study the telegram sent by General Ulysses Grant to the Confederate Commander Floyd at Fort Donelson. back in early 1862. You get the idea, right? No terms other than unconditional and immediate surrender will be